Now, Britain may have struck a deal that would allow its financial services to retain access to EU markets after Brexit. That's according to the newspaper The Times. The tentative deal would allow UK companies to keep doing business with Europe as long as they operate under equivalent regulations to Brussels. Well, let's go straight to our correspondent Vincent McAviney, who's in London. Good morning, Vincent. Does this signal finally a breakthrough or progress on the Brexit negotiations?
Good morning, Belle. Well, this is a report, as you mentioned, in The Times this morning about a deal on financial services to allow the UK and the EU, after Brexit, to have access to the markets in Europe and also for the continued flow of data between the two blocks. Now, this is something that the EU has never done before. It's something that was unexpected to be able to get through, and it would create what was known as a Canada Plus style deal, not the kind of checkers deal we think that the Prime Minister was going for. So the Times are reporting this. Technical negotiations have still been ongoing, but Dominic Raab himself hasn't been over in Brussels since before the last EU Council meeting, so it hasn't been signed off yet. And we know that both Frankfurt and Brussels were two of the cities in mainland Europe that were really competing to try to get some of this financial services business away from London. So this would be good news for the government. Dominic Raab himself yesterday, in a letter that was published, said that he expects a deal to be done now by the 21st of November. There is no official word on that, but he was trying to advise MPs on a timeline for the month. And last night, Theresa May and Philip Hammond, possibly in a sign of confidence that a deal is close, greeted some 130 business leaders in Whitehall. They were talking to them about their plans and really apparently encouraging them that when a deal is struck, those business leaders need to lobby MPs, Theresa May's own MPs, it would seem, to try to get them to vote through this deal. So a bit of movement, but we're still waiting for some clearer signs to come from both Downing Street and Brussels.
All right, thank you very much, Vincent McAviney, with The View from London. Ukraine's ongoing conflict with Russia is entering its 5th year, and the village's location right on the border makes it particularly vulnerable to political unrest. But for its small population, life continues, and for many, it's an everyday struggle to keep their businesses afloat, as Elena Cavalloni reports.
This is the story of a village in eastern Ukraine founded in the 19th century by German Mennonites. Perhaps fascinated by the Big Apple, they decided to call it New York. Today, it's called Novrotsky and lies on the contact line that divides the governmental forces and the pro-Russian separatists. Despite the war, locals like Oksana don't want to give up. Thanks to a grant from United Nations Development Program, she started a bakery that serves pastries and pizza, a spot of normality in the village.
I would have anyway opened this place later, but that's when we received the opportunity. We got the premises and that's it. We had to open it. War or not war, we had this wish. Moreover, we saw that the war was going on, but also life goes on.
The village lost 6 inhabitants under the shelling. For young people, fear and hope are common feelings. Kirilo expressed him through rap. He's only 17, but appears older than his years. He says the music is a necessity to cope with reality.
Songs are like breathing fresh air, after which I feel much better. When I feel overwhelmed by the routine, studying, or frequent shelling, I literally have no one to talk to. So I simply write my thoughts into the notes of my phone or on a page of my notebook. And when I read them, I feel much better.
Life on the contact line is hard. The cities where people used to work are now on the other side. Ceasefire violations are frequent, and previously fertile fields are now littered with mines. As conflict in eastern Ukraine enters in its 5th year, ongoing violence casts a shadow over Ukraine's development prospect and the livelihood of millions of Ukrainian citizens. In this region, the war led to job losses, destroyed the industry, and also damaged infrastructure. It also put additional pressure on the already overstretched social protection system. But few kilometers away, in the town of Mirnograd, the Central Hospital has inaugurated a new X-ray machine with help from international creditors. Now the surgical unit can serve 11,000 patients a year. With projects like this, the European Union is seeking to keep close ties with Ukraine.
If we make the life of people, of normal people, better, I mean, that's also strengthening democracy in the country. I mean, if you have better schooling, better education, better healthcare, you have people who grow, and that is also supporting democracy.
This is the only hospital to provide specialized medical care for the entire western region of Donetsk. The Ukrainian healthcare system had inefficiencies before, but the situation has deteriorated with the conflict. Doctors say there is also high demand from internally displaced people.
As the conflict broke out in East Ukraine, a large number of internally displaced people and militaries came to us, especially in 2014. It's clear that we have more patients, but at the same time we have more possibilities to help people.
At least 1.5 million people are displaced as a consequence of armed actions in eastern Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea by Russia. Rebuilding social cohesion is crucial, says the UN.
I mean the cohesion between the members of the communities, but also between the population and the state, bringing them closer together, feeling that they're part of one big endeavor to rebuild what is being destroyed here in the East.
The East is important in determining the future of the country, especially in light of the reforms it underwent after the Maidan Revolution in 2014. But the capital, Kiev, is far away, and the pro-Russia opposition says that the government has a dismissive attitude towards that region. Nobody wants another Maidan in Ukraine, and the fear is that rise of populist and pro-Russia forces would bring more political uncertainty.
Now, it's 25 years today since the Maastricht Treaty came into effect. To its critics, it was giving up national sovereignty. To its supporters, it was a force for peace in a continent once divided. Building on the foundations of the European community, it paved the way for joint currency and freedom of movement. But a quarter of a century later, Brian Carter reports on the cracks appearing across the Union.
The early 1990s were a milestone for European integration. The end of the Cold War especially marked a turning point in history, after which the 12 European member states of the time decided to push the European project to a new level. To this end, in February 1992, they signed the Maastricht Treaty. It entered into force on November 1st, 1993, 25 years ago exactly, and transformed the then called European communities into the European Union.
The member states of the prosperous European communities needed to go further than a simple economic cooperation. The cooperation should have also other levels.
The Maastricht Treaty set the stage for the birth of the euro a decade later and increased the political powers of the Union. It also created European citizenship, common foreign policy, and closer judicial cooperation. But the path to ratification was not an easy one. Referendums were held in several countries. In France, the yes won by a very thin margin. But in Denmark, the treaty was narrowly rejected, sending shockwaves throughout Europe.
This no to the referendum must make everybody think hard. But the Commission can only say that it fears that this will have no consequences.
The astonishment of Jacques Delors was widely shared by other policymakers across Europe.
For the first time, they realized that the enthusiasm that had led European negotiations prior to the Maastricht referenda wasn't necessarily shared by societies, by public opinion.
The reasons behind this rejection were diverse. For some, it was the fear of migration and the loss of national identity. For others, it was the economic model, which they accused of being too liberal and trampling on labor and social rights. The Maastricht Treaty also introduced the notion of budgetary limits based on national debts and national deficits, which was already criticized by many at the time.
There are many historical links between the Maastricht Treaty debates and today's ongoing debates. So the Maastricht Treaty was really a turning point for European integration. It was a milestone in European history, but it was also the moment in which Euroscepticism came out.
Eventually, amendments were made for Denmark, clearing the way for the adoption of the treaty and giving the EU a decisive boost. But as illustrated by Brexit, the rise of Euroscepticism, or the ongoing conflict between Rome and Brussels over budget, the issues that rocked the Maastricht ratification process are still very present today, a quarter century later. Brian Carter for Euronews.